Greetings, Carl with Disability Consulting. I want to talk to you about what to expect after you've applied for benefits. So the first thing is that there's going to be a technical review to see if you qualify. We talked earlier about have you paid into the system enough to qualify for SSDI? Or if you're applying for SSI, when you have some income and resource limits, they're going to ask you about bank accounts. They're going to ask you about any property that you own, that vehicle beyond the first vehicle that they exempt. They're going to ask you about that. So that's going to be the first thing that they go over. That's going to be the technical review. And if all that passes, then they're going to send your case out, usually to a state agency, and they're going to do a medical review. So in the medical review, they're going to request all of your medical records. You're going to tell them who your doctors are, who the hospitals are, who the therapists are, who you've seen. They're going to request all those medical records, and hopefully they'll get them. And then they'll, go through them and say, okay, what are the limitations that the medical records are showing? But that's the medical side of it. They're also going to send you forms. And way back in the day when I was working for disability, if we got the forms, great. And if we didn't get the forms, that was great too. That doesn't fly anymore. If you don't send in forms that they send you, they'll deny you. We see it all the time here. The kinds of forms that they're going to send you, one of them is called the ADL form, and that stands for Activities of Daily Living. They're going to ask you, are you able to take care of your pets? Are you able to, cook, clean, shop, drive, be around other people? Those kinds of things, just basic day-to-day things. And they use that because since you're out of work, they can't really ask you about work-related problems that you're having, but they can ask you if you're able to do household chores, if you're able to take care of pets, if you're able to feed yourself, prepare simple meals and stuff like that. And again, that's called the ADL form. It's the largest form that they send you. It's about 8 pages, and it's crucial that you guys fill this out, because they do use that information to see what your symptoms are. And we talked about how important symptoms are. They're going to send you a work history form. Work history form, they want to know in the 5 years before you became disabled, what were you doing? And they're going to ask you about what was the name of the job that you had, what was the job title. Make sure that you let them know if it was a full-time job or a part-time job. They're going to ask you how much you lifted, how much you carried, how long you stood during the day, how many hours did you stand, how many hours did you walk, how many hours did you sit, how many hours did you handle. And they're going to ask all these kinds of questions, and they're going to ask it for each job. So if you had several jobs in the last 5 years, you're going to have to describe each one of those. It is critical that you describe those jobs the way you did them, not the way you think you could do them now that you're disabled. A big, big difference. Describe them the way you did them. They're going to send you a pain questionnaire. Social Security, one of the best laws that they ever passed, and they passed it while I was still working for disability. They have to consider pain in your case. And once again, the way they do that is they'll look at the medical records. Do they have something that could reasonably support the problems with pain that they say they have? But they also use a form, and they're going to send you this pain questionnaire, and it's going to ask you, how long can you stand? How long can you walk? Are you taking medication? Does the medication work, or does it just take the edge off? One of the questions that if they don't ask, they should ask, but I think they do, is what's your pain level like on a scale from 0 to 10? 0, no pain at all. 10, you need to go to the ER and get a morphine shot. So they're going to ask those kinds of questions on a form. You also need to know that these forms, if you have to go to the hearing level, these forms become as important as sworn testimony. So if you told Social Security in one of the forms, I can't even cook a simple meal, and then a couple of years later, you're in front of a judge, and I'm getting testimony out of you, and I say, Mr. So-and-so, are you able to cook simple meals? And you say, yeah, if I push myself, I could probably, do something simple. Well, that's a red flag for the Social Security Administration. On a form, you said you couldn't even cook simple meals, but a couple of years later, you're in a hearing and you say, that you can if you push yourself. So keep in mind that anything you put on these forms carries the weight of sworn testimony later on. It's going to take a while. There are ridiculously long wait times for disability to get a decision. First decision is the initial level. It usually takes about 8 months, and it's exactly what it sounds like. This is the first time that anybody at Social Security has looked at your case, and right now that's taken about 8 months. Sometimes it's a little bit quicker, and sometimes it's a little bit longer. If that case is denied, the next appeal level is called the reconsideration, and it's about the same amount of time, 6 to 8 months, to get a decision on that. What they do is they send it to a different person and a different doctor or therapist or psychologist who looked at it the first time, and they just do a brand new, they're supposed to do a brand new review of your case. A lot of times they kind of just rely on the initial decision, which they're not supposed to do, but they do it all the time. But that's the second level, the reconsideration. If the reconsideration is denied, the next level is the hearing level. The hearing level nationwide is your best opportunity to be found disabled. Certain states have certain allowance and denial rates, and they differ. They differ wildly in some states, like from the really denial-oriented states to the allowance-oriented states. At the initial and reconsideration level, they differ wildly. But everything kind of flattens out when you get to the hearing level. The judges pretty much, in this state are going to be basically the same as in another state. And at the hearing level, it's your first time that you're actually going to be able to provide verbal testimony. And there's no forms or anything at a hearing. Right now, most of the hearings are being done by phone. We will question you as a representative. We'll question you on, certain limitations that you have. What do you do during the day? Basically, all the questions that a good representative asks you are going to be designed to win the case. The judge is going to ask you questions. The judge will probably ask you about the job, and once again, you've already filled out that form. Hopefully, you should have. And your description in the hearing needs to match the description on the form. And a good rep will kind of walk you through that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's the hearing level. A lot of people think that that's it. If you get denied at a hearing, I gave it my best shot and I'm done. But it's not the final level. After the hearing, if the hearing is denied, there's the appeals council. The appeals council is just a review Social Security component. You don't go into the appeals council, and you're not allowed to provide any more testimony. They just look at everything and make sure that everything was done right. And then the most confusing level of a disability claim, if you make it this far, if an appeals council upholds the judge's decision, Social Security says, that's it. We have made our last decision, and we don't find you disabled. There is another level, and it's called federal district court. And we partner with people who file tons of these cases. And the little known secret is that a federal district court case has a really good chance of being remanded back to Social Security. And that's because of a couple reasons, but mainly because the disability process is so complicated. For the judges to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, they're almost always going to make a mistake, and a good representative will point out that mistake and say, okay, they made a mistake, and they need to fix it either by a remand, which just means the case comes back to the judge, or a reversal. And that means that, that mistake was so bad that the person who we denied, we should have approved, and Social Security will literally reverse the decision to an approval. So if you get approved, and you can get approved at any level, there is an old wives' tale that you never win at the initial level and you never win at the reconsideration level. We win cases at the initial level all the time. We win cases at the reconsideration level, not all the time, but a lot of the time. And so you can win those cases. What happens when you win? Well, the good news about the long wait times is Social Security owes you for those months you had to wait. For example, if you say you became disabled in January of 2023, and it takes them until June of 2025 to allow your case, they owe you for that time frame that you waited. So they will give you back pay, and that's where representative fees come from. We actually get a percentage of your back pay if we win your case. And then for an SSI case, same thing, except it's from the filing date, whatever date you filed, and however long it takes Social Security to approve your case, they'll owe you for those months that you had to wait. For a free case review, click on the link in the description or give us a call at 877-204-8159.